The look of absolute shock on my brother Marcus's face when he saw me standing in the doorway of my $3 million mansion was worth every penny I had spent. There he was, along with my sister Diana, expecting to find me broken and desperate after they had cruelly excluded me from our family's annual 4th of July reunion for the first time in 32 years. Instead, they discovered me transformed into a successful tech entrepreneur who no longer needed their approval or their inheritance money. As they stood there gaping at the marble columns and crystal chandeliers visible behind me, I smiled calmly and delivered the words that would change everything between us forever. Just 3 weeks earlier, I had been scrolling through Facebook on a quiet Tuesday evening in my San Francisco apartment when I stumbled across something that shattered my world. My neighbor from back home in Cedar Falls, Nebraska, had posted photos from what was clearly our family's annual 4th of July reunion. There was Grandpa Joe's old farmhouse decorated with red, white, and blue bunting. There were my cousins playing volleyball in the same field where we had competed every summer since I was 5 years old. There was the traditional barbecue setup with Uncle Frank manning the grill, wearing his ridiculous stars and stripes apron that he brought out every year without fail. What made my stomach drop was the date stamp on the photos, July 4th, 2023. Our reunion had already happened, and I had never received an invitation. Growing up in Cedar Falls, these summer gatherings had been the cornerstone of my childhood. Every year, over 50 members of the Patterson family descended on my grandfather's sprawling farm for 3 days of celebration. We would arrive on Friday evening, and the festivities would continue through Sunday afternoon. The entire extended family would be there, aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, and even family friends who had been adopted into our circle over the decades. I remembered being 7 years old helping Grandma Helen set up the massive buffet tables under the oak trees. She would always let me arrange the paper plates and plastic forks, making me feel like I had an important job in the preparation. The men would spend Saturday morning setting up the volleyball net and horseshoe pits, while the women prepared potato salad, baked beans, and countless casseroles in the farmhouse kitchen. Those reunions had defined my understanding of family. We shared stories about ancestors who had homesteaded in Nebraska in the 1800s. We celebrated graduations, marriages, and new babies. We mourned together when family members passed away. Even when I moved to California 5 years ago to pursue my software development career, I had never missed a single reunion. Every year I would sacrifice vacation time and spend thousands of dollars on last-minute flights to make sure I was there. The travel was expensive and exhausting, but maintaining those family bonds felt essential to who I was. Cedar Falls might have been a small town with limited opportunities, but it was where my roots grew deep into generations of prairie soil. This year I had been waiting for my invitation since mid-June. Usually my Aunt Sarah would send out handwritten cards with all the details about timing, what food to bring, and updates about family news. When July 2nd arrived without any communication, I started to worry that something had gone wrong. Maybe there had been a health crisis with one of the older relatives. Maybe the reunion had been postponed due to bad weather or some other emergency. So I called my sister Diana, expecting her to explain the delay or give me updated information about the gathering. "Oh, the reunion," Diana said when I asked about the invitation. Her voice carried a strange coldness that I had never heard before. "We decided you probably wouldn't be interested this year." The casual cruelty in her tone left me speechless. "What do you mean I wouldn't be interested? I haven't missed a reunion in 27 years. "Well, you live in California now," she replied with a dismissive laugh. "You've made it pretty clear that you think you're too good for Nebraska and all of us small-town folks. We figured you had better things to do with your time." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "Diana, what are you talking about? I love coming home for the reunion. It's the highlight of my summer every year." "Sure it is," she said sarcastically. "Look, Cher, we all know how you feel about us. You don't have to pretend anymore. Enjoy your fancy California life." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone in complete bewilderment. For the first time in my adult life, I had been deliberately excluded from the family tradition that had anchored my identity since childhood. The betrayal felt like a physical wound that left me struggling to breathe. The next morning, I woke up determined to understand what had happened. Diana's accusation that I thought I was too good for the family made no sense to me. Yes, I lived in California now, but I had always been proud of my Nebraska roots. I talked about Cedar Falls all the time with my colleagues, sharing stories about small-town life and the values my family had instilled in me. I started making phone calls to other relatives, hoping to get some clarity about this sudden change in family dynamics. The conversations that followed were even more devastating than Diana's initial rejection. My cousin Jake was the first to give me real information, though he seemed reluctant to talk about it. "Cher, I don't want to get in the middle of family drama," he said when I called him at his auto repair shop. "But there's been some talk about your attitude lately." "My attitude, Jake? What kind of talk?" He sighed heavily. "Look, Marcus has been saying some things about how you've changed since you moved to California. He says you make comments about our jobs and our lifestyle choices. He thinks you look down on all of us." I felt my world tilting sideways. "Jake, that's completely untrue. I have never said anything negative about anyone's career or lifestyle. I'm proud of this family." "I'm just telling you what Marcus has been saying," Jake replied defensively. "He showed us some posts from your Instagram where you're eating at fancy restaurants and showing off your apartment. He said you're trying to prove how much better your life is than ours." The accusation was so absurd that I almost laughed. "Jake, I post pictures of my life just like everyone else posts pictures of theirs. I've never compared my life to anyone's or suggested that it was better." "Look, I don't know what to believe," Jake said. "All I know is that Marcus said you'd be happier staying in California this year, and most people agreed with him." After Jake hung up, I called my Uncle Frank, hoping for a different perspective. Frank had always been one of my favorite relatives, a gentle man who worked as a mechanic and treated everyone with kindness. Surely he would have a more balanced view of the situation. "Cher, honey," Frank said when he heard my voice. "I was wondering if you'd call about this." "Uncle Frank, I'm so confused. Can you help me understand what happened?" Frank was quiet for a long moment. "Your brother Marcus has been talking to a lot of folks about your situation. He's concerned that you're not happy with your family anymore." "That's not true, Uncle Frank. This family means everything to me." "Well, Marcus showed us some screenshots from your social media where you're posting about expensive meals and fancy places. He said you told him that we were all stuck in the past and needed to get with the times." My heart sank as I realized the scope of what was happening. "Uncle Frank, I never said anything like that. Marcus is lying about what I said." "Now, Cher, why would Marcus lie about his own sister?" I couldn't answer that question because I genuinely didn't understand Marcus's motivation. We had always had a normal sibling relationship with the usual minor conflicts, but no serious problems. I couldn't fathom why he would deliberately sabotage my standing in the family. The final conversation I had that day was with my Aunt Sarah, who'd been organizing the family reunions for over 20 years. If anyone could give me straight answers, it would be her. "Aunt Sarah, I need to understand why I wasn't invited to the reunion this year." Sarah's voice was colder than I had ever heard it. "Cher, we all talked about it, and we decided it would be better for everyone if you focused on your new life, instead of coming back here and judging all of us." "Judging you, Aunt Sarah? I have never judged anyone in this family." "Marcus shared some things you said about how we're all satisfied with mediocrity and don't have any ambition to improve ourselves. He said you think we're all a bunch of small-town losers who are holding you back." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not only had Marcus apparently fabricated quotes and attributed them to me, but he had convinced the entire family that I held them in contempt. The realization that my own brother had systematically destroyed my reputation among the people I loved most was almost too much to bear. "Aunt Sarah, Marcus is lying. I never said any of those things." "Why would Marcus make up something like that about his own sister?" she asked, echoing Uncle Frank's question. I hung up the phone feeling completely isolated and betrayed. In the space of 24 hours, I had learned that my entire extended family believed I was an arrogant, judgmental person who looked down on them. Worse, these beliefs were based on lies that my own brother had been spreading for months. As I sat in my apartment that evening, trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal, a troubling memory surfaced. Last Christmas, when I had visited Cedar Falls for the holidays, my grandmother Helen had mentioned something about updating her will. At the time, I hadn't paid much attention to the comment because estate planning seemed like a normal thing for a 90-year-old woman to consider. But now, with Marcus's coordinated campaign against me fresh in my mind, I began to wonder if there was a financial motivation behind his actions. The Patterson family had accumulated significant wealth over 5 generations of farming and business ownership. Grandmother Helen owned the original family farm, which had been in our family since 1895, plus several rental properties in town and a substantial collection of antiques. The next morning, I called Robert Thompson, the lawyer who had handled legal matters for our family since before I was born. Mr. Thompson had known me since I was a child, and I felt comfortable asking him about my grandmother's estate plans. "Cher, I'm glad you called," Mr. Thompson said when his secretary connected us. "I've been hoping to speak with you about your grandmother's recent will revision." My stomach clenched with anticipation. What kind of revision? Well, Helen came to see me about 6 months ago with some concerns about how to structure her estate. She was worried about making sure her legacy went to family members who would honor the traditions and values that have always been important to the Patterson family. "What does that mean exactly?" Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "The new will language specifies that the inheritance should go to family members who remain connected to their Nebraska roots and demonstrate ongoing commitment to family traditions. It's a departure from her previous will, which simply divided everything equally among the grandchildren." I felt the room spinning around me as the implications became clear. Mr. Thompson, who influenced this change in language, "Your brother Marcus has been spending quite a bit of time with Helen lately," he said carefully. "He's been very helpful visiting her weekly and bringing his children to see her regularly. He's expressed a lot of appreciation for traditional family values and small-town life." The picture was becoming devastatingly clear. While Marcus had been poisoning the rest of the family against me, he had simultaneously been positioning himself as the ideal heir to our grandmother's estate. His weekly visits weren't motivated by genuine care for Helen. They were part of a calculated scheme to ensure that he would inherit the bulk of the family wealth. "Mr. Thompson, can you give me an estimate of what we're talking about in terms of value?" "The farm itself is worth approximately $800,000 based on current agricultural land prices in the area. Helen's antique collection was appraised last year at just over $200,000. But the most significant asset might be the mineral rights associated with the original family property. There's been some exploration interest from energy companies, and preliminary estimates suggest those rights could be worth several $1,000,000 if development moves forward." I hung up the phone feeling sick to my stomach. Marcus wasn't just destroying my relationship with our family for emotional reasons. He was systematically stealing my inheritance by convincing everyone that I had abandoned my roots and didn't deserve to be considered a true member of the Patterson family. The financial stakes made his campaign of lies even more sinister. We weren't talking about a few $1,000s in family mementos. Between the farm, the antiques, and the potential mineral rights, Marcus stood to gain millions of dollars if he could successfully eliminate me from inheritance consideration. I spent the rest of the day researching Nebraska inheritance law and thinking about my options. The legal language in the will was subjective enough that Marcus could easily argue that my move to California demonstrated a lack of connection to Nebraska roots. My absence from this year's reunion would only strengthen his case that I had distanced myself from family traditions. As I sat in my apartment that evening looking out at the San Francisco skyline, I realized that I was facing a coordinated attack on both my personal relationships and my financial future. Marcus had spent months carefully constructing a narrative that portrayed me as an ungrateful daughter who had abandoned her family for a more glamorous life. The most painful part was realizing how effective his strategy had been. In less than a year, he had convinced our entire extended family that I was someone completely different from who I actually was. They believed I was arrogant, judgmental, and disconnected from my roots, when in reality I thought about Cedar Falls every day and missed my family constantly. But as I sat there feeling sorry for myself, another realization began to emerge. Marcus had made a critical error in his calculations. He had been so focused on manipulating the family's perception of my character that he had completely overlooked my actual circumstances. He assumed I was just another struggling tech worker living paycheck to paycheck in an expensive city vulnerable to financial pressure and family rejection. What Marcus didn't know was that 6 months earlier, my life had changed in ways that made his inheritance scheme completely irrelevant. The irony of Marcus's timing was almost laughable if it hadn't been so painful. While he spent months plotting to steal $1 million inheritance from me, I had already earned far more than that through my own efforts. 6 months ago, the cybersecurity startup I had co-founded with my business partner David Chen had achieved something that most entrepreneurs only dream about. We had successfully launched a revolutionary product and secured major venture capital funding. ShieldTech, our company, had developed artificial intelligence software that could predict and prevent cyber attacks before they happened. Traditional cybersecurity systems were reactive, responding to threats after they had already penetrated a network. Our technology was proactive, using machine learning algorithms to identify suspicious patterns and neutralize threats in real time. The development process had taken 3 years of 16-hour days, maxed out credit cards, and countless rejections from investors who didn't understand our vision. David and I had met in graduate school at Stanford, where we both studied computer science, with a focus on artificial intelligence applications. After graduation, we spent 2 years working for different tech companies, gaining experience and saving money to fund our own startup. We launched ShieldTech in a tiny office space in Palo Alto with nothing but our laptops, a coffee machine, and an unshakable belief that we could build something that would change the cybersecurity industry. For the first 18 months, we survived on ramen noodles and the occasional freelance consulting project. There were weeks when I wasn't sure we could afford to keep the lights on, let alone pay ourselves salaries. But everything changed when we successfully demonstrated our technology to the Chief Information Security Officer at a Fortune 500 company. Within minutes of seeing our system in action, he understood that we had solved a problem that had been plaguing his industry for decades. That demonstration led to our first major client contract, which provided the revenue stream we needed to refine our technology and hire additional developers. Word spread quickly through Silicon Valley's tight-knit cybersecurity community. Chief technology officers from major corporations began reaching out to us, eager to learn about our artificial intelligence approach to threat prevention. We started receiving invitations to present at industry conferences and technology summits. The turning point came 4 months ago when Sequoia Capital, one of the most prestigious venture capital firms in Silicon Valley, approached us about a Series A funding round. Sequoia had backed companies like Google, Apple, and WhatsApp, so their interest in ShieldTech was a validation of everything David and I had been working toward. The due diligence process was intense, involving weeks of financial audits, technology reviews, and market analysis. Sequoia's partners grilled us about our algorithms, our competitive advantages, and our growth projections. They brought in independent security experts to evaluate our technology and validate our claims about its effectiveness. When the final term sheet arrived, I had to read it 3 times before I could believe the numbers. Sequoia was offering $15 million in Series A funding, valuing ShieldTech at $60 million. My 40% ownership stake in the company was suddenly worth $24 million on paper. The funding announcement had been covered in TechCrunch, Forbes, and the Wall Street Journal. Industry analysts were calling our technology a game changer that would reshape how corporations approach cybersecurity. We had gone from struggling entrepreneurs to Silicon Valley success story almost overnight. But I hadn't shared this news with my family yet. I had been planning to surprise them at this year's reunion with the story of Shield Tech's success. I had imagined their faces when I told them about the funding round and the company valuation. I had wanted to explain how their values of hard work, persistence, and integrity had guided me through the challenges of building a company. Instead, while I was planning to celebrate my success with the people who had raised me, my brother was systematically destroying my reputation and positioning himself to steal an inheritance that represented a fraction of what I had already earned. The contrast was stark and painful. Marcus was scheming to claim a few $1,000,000 through manipulation and lies, while I had legitimately earned far more through innovation and dedication. He was telling everyone that I had become arrogant and materialistic, when in reality I had been quietly building a company that would create jobs and solve real problems for businesses around the world. As I reflected on the situation, I realized that I had a choice to make. I could accept my family's rejection and focus entirely on my new life in California, or I could fight back against Marcus's lies and reclaim my place in the Patterson family. The financial inheritance no longer mattered to me, but the relationships and the truth still did. I had always been someone who stood up for what was right even when it was difficult. My parents had raised me to believe that integrity mattered more than convenience, and that family bonds were worth defending. If I walked away now, Marcus would not only steal the inheritance, but he would also get away with destroying my reputation and manipulating our elderly grandmother. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to return to Nebraska not as the struggling tech worker Marcus had portrayed to the family, but as the successful entrepreneur I had actually become. I was going to expose his lies, reclaim my standing in the family, and make sure that truth prevailed over manipulation. But I was going to do it in a way that Marcus would never expect. The next morning, I opened my laptop and began researching real estate in Cedar Falls, Nebraska. If I was going to prove my commitment to my roots and expose Marcus's lies, I needed to make a statement that would be impossible to ignore. I wasn't just going to visit home. I was going to establish a permanent presence there in the most dramatic way possible. Cedar Falls had always been a small town with modest housing prices, but I was looking for something extraordinary. I wanted a property that would demonstrate my success while also showing my genuine commitment to returning to my Nebraska roots. As I scrolled through real estate listings, one property immediately caught my attention. The Morrison Estate was a magnificent Victorian mansion that had been the crown jewel of Cedar Falls since the 1890s. The current listing showed 12 acres of meticulously maintained gardens, a restored mansion with 8 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms, and architectural details that spoke to the craftsmanship of a bygone era. The asking price was $2.5 million, which would have been completely out of reach for the struggling tech worker Marcus had described to our family. But for someone with a $24 million net worth, it was an affordable investment that would send exactly the message I wanted to convey. I called the listing agent Beverly Martinez within an hour of seeing the property online. Beverly had been selling real estate in Cedar Falls for over 20 years, and she knew my family well. Her surprise at hearing from me was evident in her voice. Cher Patterson. My goodness, I haven't spoken to you since you left for California. Are you thinking about buying an investment property back home? Actually, Beverly, I'm interested in the Morrison Estate. I'd like to schedule a viewing as soon as possible. There was a long pause before Beverly responded. Cher, are you aware of the asking price on that property? It's not exactly a starter home. I smiled at her concern. I'm aware of the price and I'm prepared to make a cash offer above asking if the property meets my expectations. When can we arrange a showing? Beverly's tone shifted immediately as she realized this was a serious inquiry. I can have the current owners out of the house tomorrow morning if you'd like to fly in for a viewing. But I have to ask, are you planning to use this as a vacation home, or are you considering moving back to Nebraska? I'm planning to make Cedar Falls my primary residence again, I told her. I want to come home. The flight to Cedar Falls gave me time to think about the strategic implications of buying the Morrison estate. The house wasn't just expensive, it was historically significant. For over a century, it had been owned by the Morrison family, who had been among the most prominent citizens of Cedar Falls. The mansion had hosted governors, senators, and business leaders. It was the kind of property that represented permanent roots and long-term commitment to the community. When Beverly met me at the airport, her professional excitement was barely contained. "Cher, I have to tell you, this property has been on the market for 8 months. The owners are motivated to sell, especially to someone with local connections." The drive through downtown Cedar Falls brought back a flood of childhood memories. Main Street looked exactly the same as it had when I was growing up, with the same brick buildings housing family-owned businesses that had been there for generations. The familiarity was comforting, but I also noticed things I had never paid attention to before: the economic challenges facing small-town America, the empty storefronts that spoke to businesses that had closed, the aging infrastructure that reflected limited municipal budgets. But there was also something appealing about the pace of life here, the sense of community that existed in a place where everyone knew their neighbors and people still gathered at the local diner to discuss current events. After 5 years in Silicon Valley's hyper-competitive environment, the thought of returning to a place where success wasn't measured entirely by net worth and stock options held genuine appeal. The Morrison estate was even more impressive in person than it had appeared in the online photos. The Victorian architecture featured ornate gingerbread trim, wraparound porches with carved wooden columns, and bay windows that flooded the interior with natural light. The gardens included century-old oak trees, formal flower beds, and a carriage house that had been converted into a guest cottage. Inside, the mansion had been meticulously restored to preserve its historical character while incorporating modern amenities. The original hardwood floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and the crown molding and wainscoting showcased the craftsmanship of 19th-century artisans. The kitchen had been updated with professional-grade appliances, but the design maintained the home's period authenticity. As I walked through the rooms, I could envision hosting family gatherings here. The formal dining room could easily accommodate our extended family for holiday meals. The library would be perfect for quiet conversations with grandmother Helen about family history. The wraparound porch would provide an ideal setting for summer barbecues that could rival the traditional reunions at Grandpa Joe's farm. "The current owners are asking $2.5 million, Beverly said as we concluded the tour, "but they've indicated some flexibility on price for the right buyer." I looked out the library window at the gardens where children could play safely while adults supervised from the porch. "Beverly, I'd like to make an offer today. $3.25 million cash with a closing date within 3 weeks. Beverly's eyes widened at the offer, which was 30% above the asking price. "Cher, that's an extremely generous offer. Are you sure you want to go that high?" "I'm sure," I replied. "This isn't just a house purchase for me. I'm coming home and I want to make sure there are no delays or complications in the process." The drive back to the airport gave me time to consider the psychological impact of my decision. By purchasing the most prestigious property in Cedar Falls, I would be making a statement about my commitment to the community that no one could question. Marcus had been telling the family that I thought I was too good for Nebraska, but buying the Morrison estate would prove the exact opposite. I was investing millions of dollars in establishing permanent roots in my hometown. More importantly, the mansion would provide the perfect setting for confronting my family about Marcus's lies. Instead of meeting them on neutral ground or in their familiar territory, I would be able to host them in an environment that demonstrated my success while also honoring the historical traditions they claimed I had abandoned. During the flight back to San Francisco, I began planning the next phase of my strategy. Buying the house was just the first step. I needed to orchestrate a confrontation that would expose Marcus's deception while also giving our family the opportunity to understand who I really was and what I had actually accomplished. The closing process moved quickly thanks to Beverly's efficiency and my cash offer. Within 2 weeks, I owned the most prestigious property in Cedar Falls, complete with 12 acres of grounds and a mansion that had housed some of Nebraska's most influential families. But ownership was just the beginning. If I was going to make the impact I wanted, the mansion needed to be restored to its full glory and prepared to host the kind of gathering that would leave my family speechless. The renovation of the Morrison estate became my full-time obsession for the next month. I took a leave of absence from Shield Tech, delegating my responsibilities to David and our senior management team, and moved temporarily to Cedar Falls to oversee every detail of the restoration process. I hired Patricia Wells, an interior designer from Omaha, who specialized in historical renovations, to help me create a vision for the mansion that would honor its heritage while showcasing contemporary luxury. Patricia had worked on several museum restorations and understood how to blend period authenticity with modern comfort. The goal is to make this house feel like it could have belonged to your family for generations, Patricia explained as we walked through the rooms discussing our plans. We want elegance that feels lived in and comfortable, not like a museum display. For the contractors, I deliberately chose local businesses run by people who had connections to my family or who had known me growing up. Jake Patterson. My cousin, who owned a construction company, handled the structural work. Sarah Mitchell, who had gone to high school with me, managed the landscaping updates. Tom Rodriguez, whose family had run the town's electrical business for 3 generations, upgraded all the wiring and lighting systems. My decision to hire local contractors served multiple purposes. It demonstrated my commitment to supporting the Cedar Falls economy. It ensured that word of my project would spread throughout the community, and it gave me opportunities to reconnect with people who had known me before Marcus's campaign of lies began. The conversations with these contractors were revealing in terms of what my family had been saying about me. Jake was initially surprised that I could afford such an ambitious renovation project. "Cher, I have to ask," he said one afternoon as we reviewed plans for updating the mansion's heating system. "Are you sure you can handle the costs of a project this size? This is going to run well into the 6 figures." I smiled at his concern. "Jake, I appreciate you looking out for me, but the finances aren't a problem. I've had some success with my business in California." "Because Marcus mentioned that you were having some struggles out there," Jake continued carefully. "He said the cost of living was really high and that you were having trouble making ends meet." This was the first direct confirmation I had received about Marcus spreading lies regarding my financial situation. "Jake, I don't know why Marcus would say that, but it's completely untrue. My company has been very successful and I'm financially secure enough to take on this renovation and much more." Jake looked relieved but also confused. "Well, that's good to hear. But why would Marcus say something like that if it wasn't true?" "That's a very good question," I replied, "and I think the answer is going to surprise a lot of people." As the renovation progressed, I made another discovery that would prove crucial to my plans for confronting the family. While Patricia and I were working in the mansion's library, we decided to remove some built-in bookshelves that had been added in the 1950s to create more space for seating. Behind the shelves, we found a hidden compartment that contained original documents from the house's construction. The papers were yellowed with age, but perfectly preserved. As I carefully examined them, my heart began racing. The architectural plans were signed by Thomas Patterson, and the construction contracts were dated 1895. Thomas Patterson was my great-great-grandfather, and according to these documents, he had been the original builder and owner of the Morrison estate. I immediately called Margaret Foster, the local Historical Society president, to verify the authenticity of the documents. Margaret had been researching Cedar Falls history for over 40 years and was considered the definitive expert on the town's heritage. "My goodness, Cher," Margaret said when she saw the documents. "These are absolutely authentic. I've been looking for these construction records for decades. They confirm what we've always suspected about Thomas Patterson's role in building this mansion." Margaret explained that Thomas Patterson had been one of Cedar Falls's most successful businessmen in the late 1800s. He had made his fortune through a combination of farming, real estate development, and early investments in the railroad industry that connected Nebraska to the broader American economy. Thomas built this mansion as a symbol of his success and his commitment to making Cedar Falls a thriving community, Margaret continued. But he lost everything during the economic depression of the 1890s and was forced to sell the house to the Morrison family in 1896. The irony was overwhelming. Marcus had been telling everyone that I had abandoned my roots and lost connection to my Nebraska heritage. In reality, I had purchased and restored the house that my own ancestor had built over a century ago. I wasn't abandoning my family's legacy, I was reclaiming it. The discovery of Thomas Patterson's documents gave me the perfect narrative to counter Marcus's lies. He'd been portraying me as someone who thought she was too good for small-town life, when in fact I was literally returning to the home my family had built before economic hardship forced them to give it up. Margaret helped me research more of the family history, and we learned that Thomas Patterson had been forced to sell the mansion for a fraction of its value during the financial panic of 1896. The loss had devastated the family financially, and they had never recovered their previous prosperity. For over a century, the Pattersons had been working-class farmers and small business owners, always looking up at the mansion that had once belonged to them. Now, through my own success, I had earned enough money to buy back the family's ancestral home and restore it to its original grandeur. The symmetry was poetic, but more importantly, it provided irrefutable evidence of my connection to Cedar Falls and my commitment to honoring family tradition. As the renovation neared completion, I began planning the event that would bring my family to the mansion and force them to confront the truth about Marcus's lies. I decided to host a housewarming party over Labor Day weekend, positioning it as my attempt to reconnect with family and celebrate my return to Nebraska. The invitations would be elegant and formal, printed on custom stationery that featured a historical photograph of the mansion from Thomas Patterson's era. The message would emphasize my desire to honor family traditions and create new memories in our ancestral home. But before I sent the invitations, I needed to complete one more crucial element of my preparation. I needed to gather concrete evidence of Marcus's lies and manipulation, so that when I confronted him, he wouldn't be able to deny what he had done or claim that I was fabricating accusations against him. As the renovation of the mansion continued, I began systematically gathering intelligence about the scope of Marcus's campaign against me. I needed concrete evidence of his lies if I was going to expose him effectively, and I knew that my cybersecurity background would give me advantages in uncovering digital communications that documented his deception. My first step was to reconnect with childhood friends who still lived in Cedar Falls and who might have insight into what Marcus had been saying about me. I reached out to Emma Rodriguez, who had been my best friend in high school and now taught second grade at Cedar Falls Elementary School. Emma and I had stayed in touch sporadically over the years, but we hadn't had a serious conversation since I moved to California. "Cher, I'm so glad you called," Emma said when I reached her. "I've been wanting to talk to you about some things I've been hearing around town." We arranged to meet for coffee at Miller's Diner, the same restaurant where we had spent countless hours as teenagers, discussing our dreams for the future. When I walked into Miller's, I was struck by how little the place had changed. The same red vinyl booths, the same black and white checkered floor, even the same handwritten menu board that Mr. Miller had used for 30 years. Emma's reaction when she saw me was a mixture of excitement and concern. "Cher, you look amazing. Life in California must be treating you well." "It's been good," I replied carefully, "but I've been hearing some confusing things about what people back home think about my life there." Emma's expression became serious. "That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. There have been some rumors going around, and I wasn't sure if they were true or if you knew about them." She proceeded to tell me details about Marcus's campaign that were even more disturbing than what I had learned from my phone calls with relatives. According to Emma, Marcus had been systematically spreading lies about me throughout Cedar Falls, not just within our extended family. "Marcus has been telling people that you're struggling financially and that you've gotten involved with drugs." Emma said quietly. He claims that the tech industry culture in California has changed you and that you're not the same person who grew up here. I felt my stomach drop. Emma, none of that is true. I've never used drugs in my life, and I'm not struggling financially. I didn't think it sounded like you, Emma replied, but Marcus seemed to have specific examples. He showed people screenshots from your social media accounts that he said proved you were living beyond your means and trying to create a false image of success. The revelation that Marcus had been manipulating my social media posts was particularly infuriating. I realized he had been taking photos I posted of normal activities dinner at restaurants, my apartment social events, and reframing them as evidence of irresponsible spending and desperate attempts to appear successful. Emma continued with more details that revealed the sophistication of Marcus's manipulation. He brought his wife, Linda, and their daughters to your grandmother, Helen's 90th birthday party last month. He made a big show of presenting himself as the responsible family man who was taking care of the older generation, while other family members were too busy with their own lives to visit. I wasn't invited to grandmother's birthday party, I said, feeling another stab of betrayal. I know, Emma replied sadly. Marcus made sure everyone knew that you couldn't be bothered to come home for such an important milestone. But now that I'm talking to you, I'm realizing that you probably didn't know about it. The picture Emma painted was of a methodical campaign to isolate me from family and community connections, while positioning Marcus as the ideal representative of Patterson family values. He had been attending church services with grandmother Helen, volunteering for community events, and making sure that his positive actions were visible to everyone who mattered in terms of family dynamics. There's something else, Emma said reluctantly. Marcus has been talking about your grandmother's estate planning. He's been suggesting that it wouldn't be appropriate for the family assets to go to someone who has lost connection with Nebraska values. This confirmed my suspicions about the inheritance motivation behind Marcus's lies. He wasn't just trying to hurt me emotionally. He was building a legal and social case for excluding me from estate consideration. After my conversation with Emma, I drove to the mansion and spent the evening researching Marcus's digital footprint. Using techniques I had developed for ShieldTech's cybersecurity applications, I was able to analyze publicly available information about his online activities and communications patterns. What I discovered was even more damaging than I had expected. Marcus had created a private Facebook group called Patterson Family Updates that included most of our extended relatives. The group's posts revealed a sustained effort to share negative information about me while promoting his own family's activities and achievements. The posts were carefully crafted to seem concerned rather than malicious. Marcus would share worried updates about my concerning behavior and express hope that I would find my way back to the values that our family holds dear. He posted screenshots of my social media activity with commentary that reframed innocent posts as evidence of poor judgment or character flaws. Most disturbing were the direct messages I was able to trace between Marcus and various family members. He had been coordinating responses to my phone calls, making sure that relatives would give me consistent feedback about my supposed character problems. The messages revealed a level of manipulation that went far beyond simple sibling rivalry. In one exchange with our cousin Rachel, Marcus wrote, "Make sure you mention Cher's attitude problem if she calls you about the reunion. We need to present a united front so she understands that her behavior has consequences." In another message to Uncle Frank, Marcus said, "I've attached screenshots showing how Cher flaunts her expensive lifestyle on social media. You can see how disconnected she's become from our family's values." The digital evidence was comprehensive and damning. Marcus had orchestrated a systematic campaign to destroy my reputation based entirely on lies and manipulated information. He had convinced our family that I was arrogant, financially irresponsible, and contemptuous of their lifestyle, when none of those characterizations bore any resemblance to reality. But I also realized that this evidence gave me the ammunition I needed to expose Marcus and reclaim my standing in the family. The digital trail was clear and undeniable. When I confronted him, he wouldn't be able to claim that I was imagining things or making accusations without proof. As I sat in the mansion's library that night, surrounded by the documents that proved my family's historical connection to this house, I began planning the perfect moment to reveal everything I had learned about Marcus's deception. Armed with evidence of Marcus's digital manipulation, I realized I needed to take my investigation one step further. My cybersecurity expertise had given me insights into his online campaign, but I wanted to understand the full scope of his communications and coordination efforts. Using the legally obtained information and applying ShieldTech's threat detection algorithms to analyze communication patterns, I was able to uncover the true extent of Marcus's scheme. The analysis revealed something that shocked me even more than his initial lies. Marcus had been documenting his manipulation strategy in email exchanges with his wife, Linda. These communications showed a level of calculated planning that transformed his actions from simple family drama into deliberate fraud. In one email dated 6 months earlier, Marcus wrote to Linda, "The key is to make everyone believe that Cher thinks she's better than us. Once we establish that narrative, excluding her from inheritance consideration will seem natural and justified." Another email revealed his systematic approach to gathering ammunition against me. "I've been saving screenshots from Cher's Instagram for months. With the right commentary, I can make her normal posts look like arrogant showing off. The family will eat it up." Most damning was an exchange where Marcus explicitly discussed his financial motivations. "If we can eliminate Cher from consideration, the mineral rights alone could be worth millions when the energy companies start developing in this area. Helen's getting old, and we need to position ourselves as the obvious choice for carrying on the family legacy." The emails also revealed that Linda had been reluctant to participate in the scheme, initially expressing concerns about the morality of lying about family members. Marcus had convinced her by arguing that they needed to secure their children's financial future, and that Cher's success in California proved she didn't need the inheritance money. In one particularly revealing exchange, Linda wrote, "I feel guilty about making up stories about Cher. She's always been nice to me, and I don't think she's actually arrogant." Marcus responded, "Linda, this isn't about being nice. This is about our family's future. Cher will be fine with her tech job. We need this inheritance to give our girls the opportunities they deserve." The communications painted a clear picture of premeditated deception, motivated by greed rather than genuine family concerns. Marcus had spent months planning his campaign, calculating the financial benefits and coordinating with allies to ensure maximum effectiveness. But the digital investigation also revealed something else that would prove crucial to my confrontation strategy. Marcus had been careless about covering his tracks. He had used his regular email account and social media platforms for communications that documented his entire scheme. His overconfidence in his plan had led him to create a comprehensive digital record of his manipulation. More importantly, I discovered that Marcus had been lying not just about me, but also about his own circumstances. The emails revealed that he was facing serious financial pressure due to poor investment decisions and business failures. His construction company was struggling with debt, and he had borrowed heavily against his home to keep the business afloat. The inheritance wasn't just an opportunity for Marcus, it was a financial lifeline that he desperately needed to avoid bankruptcy. His attacks on me were motivated by desperation as much as greed, which made his actions even more reprehensible, since he was willing to destroy family relationships to solve his own financial problems. As I compiled this evidence, I also began planning the most effective way to use it. Simply confronting Marcus privately would allow him to deny everything or claim that I had fabricated the evidence. I needed a setting where the truth would be undeniable and where the family could see his deception exposed in real time. The housewarming party at the mansion would provide the perfect opportunity, but I realized I needed to create a more immediate confrontation first. If I could catch Marcus off guard and force him to reveal his true character in front of key family members, it would set the stage for a complete reversal of family dynamics. I decided to accelerate my timeline and create an opportunity for Marcus to expose himself before the planned party. The mansion renovation was nearly complete, and I was ready to begin the final phase of my plan to reclaim my place in the Patterson family while exposing the brother who had betrayed me. The evidence I had gathered was comprehensive and irrefutable. Marcus had documented his own deception through months of careless digital communications. When the moment came for confrontation, he would have no defense against the truth of his own words and actions. But I also knew that exposing Marcus was only part of my goal. I wanted to rebuild genuine relationships with family members who had been manipulated into believing lies about me. That would require not just proving Marcus wrong, but also demonstrating who I really was and what I had actually accomplished with my life. The mansion renovation had given me the perfect platform for that demonstration. The historical connection to Thomas Patterson provided a powerful narrative about honoring family legacy rather than abandoning it. The obvious investment in returning to Cedar Falls proved my commitment to my roots, and the scope of the renovation project hinted at financial success that contradicted everything Marcus had told the family about my circumstances. As I put the finishing touches on my preparation, I felt a mixture of anticipation and sadness. I was excited about the prospect of reclaiming my family relationships and exposing Marcus's lies, but I was also mourning the innocence that had been lost in this process. Family gatherings would never feel the same after learning how easily relatives could be manipulated into turning against each other. The investigation had revealed not just Marcus's deception, but also uncomfortable truths about how quickly people were willing to believe negative stories about someone they claimed to love. The family members who had excluded me from the reunion hadn't bothered to verify Marcus's accusations or give me a chance to defend myself. Their readiness to accept his lies suggested problems with family dynamics that went beyond one person's manipulation. But I was determined to fight for the relationships that mattered most to me, even if they required rebuilding from the ground up. The Patterson family had overcome challenges for 5 generations in Nebraska, and I wasn't going to let Marcus's greed and deception destroy what previous generations had worked so hard to build. With the mansion renovation nearing completion and my evidence against Marcus fully compiled, I began planning the event that would bring my family to witness the truth about our situation. The housewarming party needed to be elegant enough to showcase the mansion's restoration while creating an environment where I could address the lies that had torn our family apart. I hired James Sullivan, a renowned caterer from Omaha, who specialized in creating sophisticated events that honored regional culinary traditions. James understood my vision for an event that would celebrate Nebraska heritage while demonstrating contemporary success. The menu would feature locally sourced ingredients prepared with techniques that elevated familiar flavors into something extraordinary. "We'll serve Nebraska beef tenderloin with a sauce made from local mushrooms," James explained as we planned the menu. "The sides will include sweet corn sourced from family farms in the area, but prepared in ways that showcase the quality of the ingredients. Everything will feel both familiar and special." The invitation design required careful consideration of tone and message. I worked with a graphic designer to create elegant cards featuring a historical photograph of the mansion from the 1890s, when Thomas Patterson had first built the house. The invitation text emphasized my desire to reconnect with family and honor our shared heritage in a meaningful way. The invitation read, "You are cordially invited to celebrate the restoration of the Patterson family's ancestral home. Join me for an evening of reconnection, reflection, and renewal as we honor the traditions that bind us together across generations. Your presence would mean everything to me as I officially return home to Cedar Falls." I sent invitations to every family member who had been present at the reunion that excluded me, along with several childhood friends and community leaders who had known my family for generations. The guest list included over 40 people, ensuring that whatever happened at the event would be witnessed by representatives of both family and community. But I also realized that waiting for the formal party might not provide the most effective confrontation with Marcus. I needed an opportunity to catch him off guard and force him to reveal his true character without the buffer of a large social gathering. The evidence I had compiled would be most powerful if presented in a setting where Marcus couldn't hide behind social niceties or claim that I was causing a scene. I decided to create an opportunity for Marcus to visit the mansion before the party, giving me a chance for private confrontation, while also demonstrating the scope of my success in a setting that would maximize psychological impact. I sent him a separate note requesting a family meeting to address some misunderstandings and plan for moving forward together. The mansion provided the perfect backdrop for psychological warfare. The obvious luxury and elegance of the restoration would immediately contradict everything Marcus had told the family about my financial struggles. The historical connection to Thomas Patterson would undermine his claims about my abandonment of family roots, and the private setting would prevent him from deflecting or changing the subject when confronted with evidence of his deception. As I prepared for this confrontation, I also had to consider the emotional stakes involved. Marcus wasn't just a business adversary or competitor. He was my brother, someone with whom I had shared childhood memories and family experiences. The evidence of his betrayal was devastating, but I also felt grief about the relationship we had lost and the trust that had been destroyed. I spent hours walking through the mansion's restored rooms, thinking about the family gatherings we could host here if we could move past the damage Marcus had caused. The formal dining room could accommodate holiday meals with the entire extended family. The library could become a place where Grandmother Helen could share family stories with younger generations. The gardens could host summer barbecues that honored our tradition while creating new memories. But achieving that vision would require more than just exposing Marcus's lies. It would require rebuilding trust with family members who had been manipulated into believing false narratives about my character and priorities. Some of those relationships might be repairable, while others might be permanently damaged by what had happened. The mansion renovation was complete, the evidence was compiled, and the invitations had been sent. Everything was in place for the confrontations that would determine whether I could reclaim my place in the Patterson family or whether Marcus's manipulation had caused irreparable damage to relationships that had once been the foundation of my identity. As Labor Day weekend approached, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety about the events that would unfold. The next few days would reveal not just the truth about Marcus's deception, but also the character of family members who'd been faced with choosing between manipulation and integrity. I had done everything I could to prepare for success, but the outcome would depend on whether the family values I had always believed in were strong enough to overcome the damage that greed and lies had inflicted on our relationships. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change the Patterson family forever. 2 days before my planned housewarming party, I was in the mansion's library reviewing final preparations when my security system chimed with an alert. The cameras I had installed during the renovation showed Marcus's beat-up pickup truck and Diana's silver sedan pulling into my circular driveway. They had arrived earlier than I expected, but their timing was actually perfect for what I had planned. Through the security monitors, I could see both of my siblings getting out of their vehicles with aggressive, determined body language. Marcus was gesturing emphatically as he spoke to Diana, clearly preparing her for what he expected to be a confrontation with a desperate, financially struggling sister. Diana nodded along with whatever he was telling her, her expression set in the same cold mask I had heard in her voice during our phone conversation about the reunion exclusion. I took a moment to compose myself, smoothing my elegant cashmere sweater and checking my reflection in the library's antique mirror. The woman looking back at me was confident, successful, and completely in control of the situation. This was exactly the image I wanted to project when I opened the door to my siblings who expected to find me broken and defensive. The doorbell's melodic chimes echoed through the mansion's grand foyer as I walked calmly toward the entrance. Through the etched glass panels of the front door, I could see Marcus and Diana standing on the wraparound porch, both of them looking around at the mansion's obvious luxury with expressions that suggested they were already realizing this confrontation might not go as they had planned. I opened the door with a warm smile as if I were genuinely delighted to see them. Marcus, Diana. What a wonderful surprise. Please come in. Marcus immediately tried to take control of the situation, pushing past me into the foyer with an air of aggressive authority. Cher, we need to talk. There are some things that need to be settled between us. Diana followed him inside, but I noticed her eyes widening as she took in the mansion's restored grandeur. The crystal chandelier hanging from the coffered ceiling, the marble floors with intricate inlay patterns, and the sweeping staircase with its hand-carved banister were obviously not what she had expected to find. "This is quite a house," Diana said slowly, her hostility momentarily replaced by confusion. "Thank you," I replied graciously. "I've been working on restoring it to its original condition. Would you like some coffee? I just brewed a fresh pot." Marcus's face was flushed with anger, but I could see uncertainty creeping into his expression as he realized that the expensive renovation surrounding him contradicted everything he had been telling the family about my financial struggles. "We're not here for coffee," he said sharply. "We're here because you've been causing problems for this family and it needs to stop." I maintained my calm demeanor, gesturing toward the living room. "Why don't we sit down and discuss whatever's troubling you? I'm sure we can work through any misunderstandings." As I led them into the living room, I watched Diana's reaction to the restoration work. The room featured period-appropriate furniture that had been professionally restored artwork that reflected the mansion's historical significance and subtle touches of modern luxury that demonstrated both taste and financial resources. Marcus sat down heavily in one of the antique chairs, his discomfort with the elegant surroundings obvious in his posture. "Cher, I don't know what game you're playing with this house, but it needs to stop. You can't just throw money around trying to buy your way back into the family." "Buy my way back?" I asked innocently. "Marcus, I'm not sure what you mean. This is my home. I'm planning to live here permanently." Diana was staring at a professionally framed photograph on the mantelpiece that showed the mansion during its original construction in the 1890s. "Cher, how did you afford all of this? This renovation must have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars." The question gave me the perfect opening to begin dismantling Marcus's lies. "Diana, I'm curious about why you think I couldn't afford it. Has someone been telling you that I'm having financial problems?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair, realizing that his narrative about my supposed financial struggles was about to be exposed. We all know that tech jobs in California are unstable, and the cost of living out there is impossible. You don't have to pretend with us. I smiled at his obvious discomfort. "Marcus, where exactly did you get the idea that I was struggling financially? Did I ever tell you I was having money problems?" "You didn't have to tell me," Marcus replied defensively. "It's obvious from your social media posts that you're trying to create an image that doesn't match reality." Diana looked confused by the exchange. "What do you mean, Marcus? What social media posts?" This was the moment I had been waiting for. "Diana, has Marcus been showing you screenshots of my social media activity and providing his interpretation of what they meant?" The color was beginning to drain from Marcus's face as he realized I was leading him into a trap. "I was just trying to help the family understand what was really going on with you." "Help them understand," I repeated, "or help them believe something that wasn't true." I walked over to the library desk and retrieved the folder containing printed copies of Marcus's digital communications. "I think it's time we looked at what was really going on behind the scenes." Diana's expression shifted to concern as she saw the thick folder in my hands. "Cher, what is that?" "This," I said, settling into the chair across from my siblings, "is documentation of a very interesting email and social media campaign that's been running for the past 6 months. Diana, did you know that Marcus has been coordinating a systematic effort to isolate me from our family?" Marcus jumped to his feet, his face now completely flushed. "That's ridiculous. Cher, you're being paranoid." I opened the folder and pulled out the first set of documents. Diana let me read you something that Marcus wrote to his wife Linda 3 months ago. I began reading from the printed email. The key is to make everyone believe that Cher thinks she's better than us. Once we establish that narrative, excluding her from inheritance consideration will seem natural and justified. Diana's mouth fell open as she stared at Marcus. You wrote that. Cher is obviously making this up, Marcus said desperately, but his panic was evident in his voice. I continued reading from his emails. I've been saving screenshots from Cher's Instagram for months. With the right commentary, I can make her normal posts look like arrogant showing off. The family will eat it up. Diana turned to Marcus with an expression of growing horror. Marcus, did you actually write these things? Even if I did, Marcus said, his voice rising defensively. It's because Cher has been acting like she's too good for all of us. Someone had to protect the family from her attitude. I pulled out another document. Diana hears what Marcus wrote about grandmother Helen's inheritance. If we can eliminate Cher from consideration, the mineral rights alone could be worth millions when the energy companies start developing in this area. The final piece of evidence hit Diana like a physical blow. She stared at Marcus with a mixture of shock and disgust. You've been lying about Cher to steal her inheritance. I wasn't stealing anything, Marcus shouted. Cher doesn't need that money. Look at this house, she's obviously doing fine without it. Diana stood up slowly, her voice shaking with emotion. Marcus, do you realize what you've done? You made me exclude my own sister from the family reunion based on lies. You convinced me that she was arrogant and ungrateful when you were the one manipulating everyone. I could see that Diana was beginning to understand the full scope of Marcus's deception, but I had one more revelation that would complete her transformation. Diana, there's something else you need to know about this house, I said gently. When I was renovating the library, I found original construction documents hidden behind some bookshelves. This mansion was built by Thomas Patterson in 1895. Diana's eyes widened as the significance hit her. Thomas Patterson, our great-great-grandfather. I nodded and pulled out the historical documents Margaret Foster had helped me authenticate. He built this house as the crown jewel of Cedar Falls, but he lost it during the economic depression of the 1890s. Marcus has been telling everyone that I abandoned my roots, but I actually bought back our family's ancestral home. The irony was devastating, and Diana could see it clearly. While Marcus had been claiming that I had disconnected from family traditions, I had literally reclaimed the most significant piece of our family's historical legacy. So when Marcus said you thought you were too good for Nebraska, Diana said slowly, you were actually investing millions of dollars in coming home permanently. That's right, I confirmed. I was planning to surprise everyone at this year's reunion with the news about the house and my business success. I wanted to share my achievements with the family I love. Diana turned to Marcus with tears in her eyes. How could you do this to her? How could you do this to all of us? Marcus was cornered now, and his desperation was making him increasingly aggressive. Fine, maybe I exaggerated some things, but Cher still thinks she's better than us. Look at how she's living compared to the rest of the family. Marcus, I said quietly, I'm successful because I work hard just like our parents taught us. But I've never thought I was better than anyone in this family. The only person who created that impression was you, through your lies and manipulation. Diana was crying now, the full weight of her complicity in Marcus's scheme hitting her. Cher, I'm so sorry. I believed everything he told me. I helped exclude you from the reunion, and I was horrible to you on the phone. Diana, you were manipulated by someone you trusted, I said gently. The blame belongs with Marcus, not with you. But I wasn't finished exposing the depth of Marcus's deception. The most shocking revelation was still to come. Diana was still processing the magnitude of Marcus's manipulation when I decided to deliver the final blow that would expose the true scope of my success. There's something else you both need to understand about my actual circumstances, I said, reaching for another folder I had prepared. What do you mean? Diana asked, wiping tears from her eyes. I pulled out copies of the recent news articles about Shield Tech's funding round. 6 months ago, the cybersecurity company I co-founded secured $15 million in Series A funding from Sequoia Capital, one of the most prestigious venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. Diana stared at the TechCrunch article headline, Shield Tech raises $15 million Series A for revolutionary AI cybersecurity platform. Marcus's face went completely white as he realized what I was revealing. The funding round valued Shield Tech at $60 million. I continued calmly. My 40% ownership stake is worth approximately $24 million. The silence in the room was deafening. Diana looked back and forth between the financial documents and Marcus's shocked expression, trying to process numbers that were far beyond anything she had imagined. $24 million, Diana repeated slowly. That's correct, I confirmed. Marcus has been scheming to steal a potential inheritance worth maybe $2 or $3 million, while I had already earned 10 times that amount through my own work. Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. That's impossible. You're just a programmer. I smiled at his ignorance. Marcus, I'm not just a programmer. I'm a co-founder and chief technology officer of a company that's revolutionizing how corporations protect themselves from cyber attacks. Our artificial intelligence algorithms can predict and prevent security breaches before they happen. Every major company in America needs what we've built. Diana was staring at me with a mixture of amazement and shame. Cher, why didn't you ever tell us about this success? I was planning to surprise everyone at the family reunion, I said sadly. I wanted to share the good news with all of you and explain how the values you taught me had helped me build something meaningful. Instead, I learned that I had been excluded from the family based on lies about my character and my circumstances. Marcus was slumped in his chair, the full magnitude of his failure becoming clear to him. Not only had his scheme been exposed, but he now realized that the inheritance he had been plotting to steal was insignificant compared to the wealth I had already accumulated. The irony is devastating, isn't it? I continued. While you were telling everyone that I was struggling financially and had lost connection with family values, I was actually building a company worth more than our entire family's generational wealth combined. Diana stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the mansion's gardens while she processed everything she had learned. Marcus, do you understand what you've done? You destroyed our sister's reputation in the family because you were jealous of success you didn't even know existed. I wasn't jealous, Marcus protested weakly. I was trying to protect the family from someone who had changed. No, I said firmly. You were trying to steal my inheritance because your own financial situation is desperate. I know about your construction company's debts and the loans you took against your house. Marcus's remaining defenses crumbled as he realized I had uncovered that information as well. How do you know about that? Because when someone tries to destroy my reputation, I investigate their motivations, I replied. Your business is failing and you needed that inheritance money to avoid bankruptcy. You were willing to lie about your own sister and manipulate our elderly grandmother because you made poor financial decisions. Diana turned back from the window with a look of complete disgust. Marcus, you used me to help steal from Cher because you can't manage your own business properly. The room fell silent as the full scope of Marcus's deception and desperation became clear. He had orchestrated an elaborate campaign of lies, manipulated family relationships, and exploited an elderly woman's trust, all to solve financial problems he had created through his own poor judgment. Diana, I said gently, I want you to know that I don't blame you for believing Marcus's lies. He's your brother, and you had no reason to think he would fabricate evidence and manipulate the entire family. Diana was crying again, but now her tears seemed to be a mixture of relief and shame. Cher, how can you forgive me for treating you so badly? Because family relationships are worth fighting for when they're built on truth instead of lies, I replied. Marcus chose manipulation and greed. You were just trying to protect what you thought were legitimate family concerns. But our conversation was interrupted by the sound of car doors slamming in the driveway. Through the living room windows, I could see that the rest of our extended family had begun arriving for what they thought would be an intervention about my problems. Instead, they were about to witness Marcus's complete exposure and the revelation of truths that would change our family dynamics forever. The sound of multiple vehicles arriving sent Marcus into a panic. Through the mansion's large windows, we could see Uncle Frank's truck, Aunt Sarah's SUV, and Cousin Jake's sedan pulling into the circular driveway. Behind them came Grandmother Helen's distinctive blue Cadillac driven by Uncle Robert. "What's happening?" Marcus demanded. "Who did you invite here?" "I didn't invite anyone today," I replied calmly, but it looks like the family decided to come support what they thought would be an intervention about my problems. Instead, they're going to witness the truth about your lies. Diana was staring out the window at the arriving relatives, her face pale with the realization that Marcus's deception was about to be exposed in front of the entire family. "Marcus, you have to tell them the truth before this gets any worse." "I'm not telling them anything," Marcus said desperately. "Cher, you can't humiliate me in front of everyone. I'm still your brother." "You should have thought about that before you systematically destroyed my reputation in this family," I replied. "I'm not going to humiliate you, Marcus. I'm simply going to let everyone see the evidence of what you actually did." The doorbell chimed again this time with the multiple voices of our extended family audible through the door. I could hear Uncle Frank's distinctive laugh and Aunt Sarah's voice directing someone to park behind the other cars. I opened the front door to find our entire extended family gathered on the porch, clearly expecting to find me in crisis. Instead, they were confronted with the obvious luxury of the mansion's restoration and my composed demeanor. "Everyone please come in," I said warmly. "What a wonderful surprise to see you all." Uncle Frank was the first to speak as they filed into the grand foyer. "Cher, honey, we came as soon as we heard that Marcus and Diana were coming to talk to you about some problems you've been having." Aunt Sarah was looking around the mansion's interior with obvious confusion. "Cher, this house is incredible. How did you afford something like this?" "That's exactly what we've been discussing," I replied, leading the group into the spacious living room. "There seem to have been some misunderstandings about my circumstances that need to be cleared up." Grandmother Helen was the last to enter, supported by Uncle Robert's arm. At 90 years old, she moved slowly, but her mind was still sharp. Her eyes took in the mansion's elegant details with obvious appreciation. "Cher, dear," she said in her soft voice, "this is a beautiful home. It reminds me of the stories my grandmother used to tell about the Patterson family's house from the old days." "Grandma Helen, that's because this is the Patterson family's house from the old days," I said gently. "This mansion was built by our great-great-grandfather, Thomas Patterson, in 1895. The revelation sent a ripple of shock through the assembled family. Cousin Jake was the first to respond. "Cher, are you saying this is the house that Thomas Patterson built before the family lost it during the Depression?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," I confirmed, showing them the historical documents I had found. I discovered these original construction papers during the renovation. Thomas Patterson built this mansion as the crown jewel of Cedar Falls, and I've restored it to honor our family's legacy. Uncle Frank whistled appreciatively as he examined the documents. "Cher, this is incredible. You've brought the family home." Diana chose that moment to reveal the devastating truth about Marcus's deception. "Uncle Frank, there's something else you all need to know. Marcus has been lying to everyone about Cher for months." The room fell silent as Diana's words sank in. Aunt Sarah looked confused. "What do you mean lying about Cher?" Diana pulled out the folder containing Marcus's printed emails and social media communications. "Marcus has been spreading false stories about Cher's character and financial situation. He's been manipulating all of us to exclude her from the family so he could position himself to inherit more of grandmother's estate." The family's shock was palpable as Diana began reading excerpts from Marcus's documented communications. With each revelation about his systematic campaign of lies, the relatives who had believed his stories began to understand how they had been manipulated. Cousin Jake was the first to express his outrage. "Marcus, you mean you made up all those stories about Cher being arrogant and struggling with money?" Marcus tried to defend himself, but his lies were collapsing in real time. "I didn't make anything up. I just interpreted what I was seeing." "You interpreted," Uncle Frank said angrily. "Marcus, these emails show you planning to fabricate evidence against your own sister. This isn't interpretation. This is deliberate deception." But the most devastating reaction came from grandmother Helen, who had been listening to the revelations with increasing dismay. "Marcus," she said in a voice that carried deep disappointment, "how could you lie to me about Cher? How could you manipulate an old woman's love for her family?" The room was silent as everyone waited for Marcus's response, but he had no defense for the evidence that surrounded him. His scheme had been completely exposed, and the family could see the true scope of his deception. "There's one more thing everyone should know," I said gently. "Marcus has been motivated by more than just greed. His construction business is failing, and he desperately needed the inheritance money to avoid bankruptcy." The final revelation completed Marcus's humiliation. Not only had he lied to the family, but he had done so to solve financial problems created by his own poor business decisions. Aunt Sarah shook her head in disgust. "Marcus, you destroyed your sister's reputation in this family because you couldn't manage your own finances properly." But Grandmother Helen had one more surprise that would change everything. Grandmother Helen slowly stood up from her chair, supported by Uncle Robert, but clearly determined to address the family herself. At 90 years old, she commanded respect from everyone in the room, and her voice, though soft, carried the authority of the family matriarch. "There's something I need to tell all of you." She began, her eyes moving from person to person around the room. "Marcus, I've known about your lies for months." The room fell completely silent. Marcus's face went white as he stared at our grandmother in shock. "What do you mean, Grandma Helen?" Diana asked carefully. "I mean that I've known Marcus was lying about Cher since he started his campaign against her," Helen said with quiet dignity. "When you reach my age, you develop good instincts about people's motivations. Marcus's sudden interest in visiting me every week combined with his constant criticism of Cher made me suspicious." Uncle Frank leaned forward in his chair. "Mom, if you knew Marcus was lying, why did you let it continue?" Helen's smile was sad but wise. "Because I wanted to see what kind of people my family members really were when they thought money was at stake. I wanted to understand who would stand by their principles and who would abandon them for financial gain." Aunt Sarah looked confused. "But you changed your will to favor family members who stayed connected to Nebraska roots." "I did change my will," Helen confirmed, "but not for the reasons Marcus thought. I changed it because I wanted to test everyone's character. I've been working with Robert Thompson to document which family members tried to verify Marcus's claims about Cher versus those who simply accepted rumors without question." Marcus was staring at our grandmother in horror. "You mean you were testing us?" "I was testing you, Marcus," Helen replied firmly, "and you failed completely. Instead of showing integrity and family loyalty, you showed greed and willingness to lie about people you're supposed to love." Helen turned to face me with obvious affection. Cher, on the other hand, never called me to complain about Marcus or defend herself against his accusations. Instead, she quietly built a successful business and bought back our family's ancestral home to honor our heritage. The revelation that Helen had been aware of Marcus's deception all along transformed the entire dynamic in the room. She hadn't been a vulnerable elderly woman being manipulated. She'd been a wise matriarch testing her family's character. "Grandma Helen," I said gently, "you knew Marcus was lying, but you let me suffer through months of family rejection." Helen's expression showed deep regret. "Cher, that was the hardest part of this test. but I needed to see how you would respond to adversity. Would you become bitter and vindictive, or would you maintain your integrity and find constructive ways to address the situation?" She gestured around the beautifully restored mansion. "Your response was to invest in your roots and plan to bring the family together in our ancestral home. Marcus's response was to lie, manipulate, and scheme for financial gain." Helen reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope. "I've prepared a new will that reflects what I learned during this test. Marcus will inherit nothing from my estate due to his documented deception and manipulation. The family assets will go primarily to share with trust funds established for family members who showed integrity during this crisis." Marcus's face crumpled as he realized that his scheme had not only failed, but had cost him everything he had been trying to gain. "Grandma, I was just trying to secure my family's future." "By destroying your sister's reputation and lying to your own grandmother," Helen asked sadly. "Marcus, those aren't family values. That's selfishness and dishonesty." Diana stepped forward to support Helen's decision. "Grandma Helen, I think you made the right choice. I was manipulated by Marcus's lies, but I should have verified his claims before turning against Cher." One by one, the other family members expressed their support for Helen's decision and their regret for believing Marcus's fabricated stories. Uncle Frank apologized for questioning my character without giving me a chance to defend myself. Aunt Sarah admitted that she should have known Marcus's accusations didn't match the person who had grown up in their family. The most emotional moment came when Cousin Jake approached me with tears in his eyes. "Cher, I'm ashamed that I believed Marcus's lies about you. You've always been one of the most genuine people in this family, and I should have trusted my own judgment instead of listening to gossip." As the family members continued to express their regret and support, Marcus realized that he had lost not just the inheritance, but also the respect and trust of everyone he had tried to manipulate. His wife Linda, who had been waiting in the car during the confrontation, came inside and publicly apologized for her role in his scheme. "I'm filing for divorce," Linda announced quietly. "I can't be married to someone who would lie to his own family for money." The complete reversal of Marcus's fortunes was devastating, but appropriate. His greed and deception had cost him his inheritance, his family relationships, and his marriage. The scheme that was supposed to secure his financial future had instead destroyed everything that mattered in his life. But for the rest of us, Helen's wisdom had revealed important truths about family loyalty, integrity, and the difference between love and manipulation. The painful months of separation had ultimately strengthened our bonds by forcing us to confront what we really valued in our relationships with each other. 6 months later, as I sit in the mansion's restored library writing this story, I'm surrounded by evidence of how profoundly our family dynamics have changed. The housewarming party that I had originally planned as a confrontation became instead a genuine celebration of reunion and renewal. The mansion has become the new center of Patterson family gatherings, with the annual reunion, now hosted in the gardens, where Thomas Patterson once welcomed guests over a century ago. The irony isn't lost on any of us that the house Marcus claimed represented my abandonment of family roots has become the place where our family traditions have been reborn. Diana and I have rebuilt our relationship stronger than it ever was before. She's become my closest ally in planning family events and has taken on the role of family historian, working with me to document the stories and traditions that connect us across generations. Her children, my nephew and niece, spend summers at the mansion, learning about their heritage and developing the kind of family bonds that Marcus's lies had threatened to destroy. The extended family has embraced my success with genuine pride, celebrating ShieldTech's continued growth and my expanding role as a technology entrepreneur. Several of my younger cousins have applied for internships at the company, and I've been able to create opportunities for family members who are interested in technology careers. Grandmother Helen moved into the mansion's guest wing last fall, allowing me to care for her while she shares family stories and helps ensure that the house's restoration honors our history accurately. Her presence has transformed the mansion from an impressive property into a true family home, filled with wisdom, laughter, and the kind of love that Marcus's manipulation had temporarily obscured. Shield Tech has continued to thrive beyond my wildest expectations. Our Series B funding round last month valued the company at over $200 million, making my stake worth approximately $80 million. But more importantly, our technology is now protecting thousands of companies from cyber threats, creating jobs, and solving real problems in the digital security industry. I've used this success to establish the Patterson Family Technology Scholarship Fund, providing full college scholarships for Nebraska students who want to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The fund ensures that my wealth benefits my home community while honoring the values of education and hard work that my family instilled in me. Marcus faced consequences that extended far beyond the loss of his inheritance. Linda followed through on her divorce, gaining custody of their daughters and revealing additional instances of his dishonesty that had affected their marriage. His construction business collapsed when word of his character issues spread through the close-knit Cedar Falls business community. He eventually left town, though we've heard he's working as a laborer for a construction company in Colorado and attending counseling to address his issues with greed and manipulation. The family has established clear boundaries around Marcus's potential return to our circle. Grandmother Helen has made it clear that he would need to demonstrate genuine remorse, complete a comprehensive program of personal accountability, and make meaningful amends to everyone he harmed before any reconciliation could be considered. Most importantly, the experience taught all of us profound lessons about the difference between authentic relationships and those based on manipulation. We learned that real family love doesn't require diminishing others or competing for resources. True success comes from integrity, hard work, and maintaining genuine connections despite distance or differences. The mansion hosts quarterly family gatherings now, along with corporate retreats for Shield Tech and community events that benefit Cedar Falls. It has become a symbol of positive legacy rather than lost heritage, proving that sometimes you have to reclaim your roots rather than simply inheriting them. Every morning when I wake up in the bedroom that overlooks the gardens Thomas Patterson designed, I'm reminded that the most valuable inheritance isn't money or property, but the values and relationships that connect us across generations. Marcus's greed nearly destroyed those connections, but ultimately his manipulation exposed their true strength. The Patterson family's story continues in this house, where it began over a century ago, built now on foundations of truth, integrity, and genuine love rather than fear and competition. We've learned that family bonds are worth fighting for, but only when they're built on honesty and mutual respect. As I finish writing this account, I can hear Diana's children playing in the gardens, while she and Grandmother Helen plan next month's Easter gathering. The sounds of family life filling this house again remind me why I fought so hard to reclaim not just my inheritance, but my place in a family that's stronger for having confronted the truth about who we really are and what we truly value. Have you ever had to fight for relationships that were important to you? Have you experienced the pain of family betrayal or the joy of reconnection? After misunderstandings were cleared up, I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below about overcoming family conflicts and rebuilding trust after it's been broken. Please like this story if it resonated with your own experiences. Subscribe for more stories about family dynamics and personal triumph. And share this with anyone who might be struggling with similar challenges in their own family relationships. Thank you for listening to my journey from exclusion to reunion, and I hope you find the same courage to fight for truth and authenticity in your own important relationships.